The Pilgrim's Progress, Part 1, Chapter 10. The Pilgrim's Progress, by John Bunyan, Part 1, Chapter 10. I saw then in my dream that Hopeful looked back and saw Ignorance, whom they had left behind, coming after.
"Look,"
said he to Christian,
"how far yonder youngster loitereth behind."
Ay, I see him. He careth not for our company.
But I think it would not have hurt him had he kept pace with us hitherto.
That is true, but I warrant you, he thinks otherwise.
That I think he doth. But however, let us tarry for him.
Then the Christian said to him,
Come away, man. Why do you stay so behind?
I take my pleasure in walking alone, even more a great deal than in company, unless I like it the better.
Then said Christian to Hopeful, but softly,
Did I not tell you he cared not for our company? But however,
said he,
come up and let us talk away the time in this solitary place.
Then, directing his speech to Ignorance, he said,
Come, how do you? How stands it between God and your soul now?
I hope well, for I am always full of good thoughts that come into my mind to comfort me as I walk.
What good motions, pray tell us.
Why, I think of God and heaven.
So do the devils and lost souls.
But I think of them and desire them.
So do many that are never like to come there. The soul of the sluggard desireth and hath nothing.
But I think of them and leave all for them.
That I doubt, for leaving of all is a very hard matter, yea, a harder matter than many are aware of. But why, or by what, art thou persuaded that thou hast left all for God and heaven?
My heart tells me so.
The wise man says, He that trusteth in his own heart is a fool.
This is spoken of an evil heart, but mine is a good one.
But how dost thou prove that?
It comforts me in the hopes of heaven.
That may be through its deceitfulness, for a man's heart may minister comfort to him in the hopes of that thing for which he has yet no ground to hope.
But my heart and life agree together, and therefore my hope is well grounded.
Who told thee that thy heart and life agree together?
My heart tells me so.
Ask my fellow if I be a thief. Thy heart tells thee so. Except the word of God telleth thee in this matter, other testimony is of no value.
But is it not a good heart that hath good thoughts? And is not that a good life that is according to God's commandments?
Yes, that is a good heart that hath good thoughts, and that is a good life that is according to God's commandments. But it is one thing indeed to have these, and another thing only to think so.
Pray, what count you good thoughts, and a life according to God's commandments?
There are good thoughts of many kinds, some respecting ourselves, some God, some Christ, and some other things.
You go so fast, I cannot keep pace with you. Do you go on before. I must stay a while behind.
Then they said,
Well, Ignorance, wilt thou yet foolish be, to slight good counsel 10 times given thee? And if thou yet refuse it, thou shalt know, ere long, the evil of thy doing so.
Remember, man, in time. Stoop, do not fear. Good counsel taken well saves, therefore hear. But if thou yet shalt slight it, thou wilt be the loser, Ignorance, I'll warrant thee.
Then the Christian addressed himself thus to his fellow.
Well, come, my good friend Hopeful, I perceive that thou and I must walk by ourselves again.
So I saw in my dream that they went on a pace before, and Ignorance he came hobbling after. Then said Christian to his companion,
It pities me much for this poor man. It will certainly go ill with him at last.
Alas, there are abundance in our town in his condition, whole families, yea, whole streets, and that of pilgrims too. And if there be so many in our parts, how many, think you, must there be in the place where he was born?
Indeed, the word saith, He hath blinded their eyes, lest they should see.
Well said. I believe you have said the truth. Are we now almost got past the enchanted ground?
Why, art thou weary of our talking?
No, verily, but that I would know where we are.
We have now not above 2 miles further to go thereon. Well, we will leave at this time our neighbour Ignorance by himself, and fall upon another subject.
With all my heart, but you shall still begin.
Well then, did you not know about 10 years ago one Temporary in your parts, who was a forward man in religion then?
Well, know him? Yes. He dwelt in Graceless, a town about 2 miles off of Honesty, and he dwelt next door to one Turnback.
Right, he dwelt under the same roof with him. Well, that man was much awakened once. I believe that then he had some sight of his sins, and of the punishment that was due thereto.
I am of your mind, for, my house not being above 3 miles from him, he would ofttimes come to me, and that with many tears. Truly I pitied the man, and was not altogether without hope of him. But, one may see, it is not every one that cries, Lord, Lord.
He told me once that he was resolved to go on pilgrimage as we do now, but all of a sudden he grew acquainted with one save self, and then he became a stranger to me, for at that time he gave up going on pilgrimage.
End of Part 1, Chapter 10. The Pilgrim's Progress, Part 1, Chapter 11. The Pilgrim's Progress, by John Bunyan, Part 1, Chapter 11. Now I saw in my dream that by this time the pilgrims were got over the enchanted ground, and entering into the country of Beulah, whose air was very sweet and pleasant. The way lying directly through it, they enjoyed themselves there for a season. Yea, here they heard continually the singing of birds, and saw every day the flowers appear on the earth, and heard the voice of the turtle in the land. In this country the sun shineth night and day, wherefore this was beyond the valley of the shadow of death, and also out of the reach of giant despair. Neither could they from this place so much as see Doubting Castle. Here they were within sight of the city they were going to. Also here met them some of the inhabitants thereof, for in this land the shining ones commonly walked, because it was upon the borders of heaven. Here they had no want of corn or wine, for in this place they met with abundance of what they had sought for in all their pilgrimage. Here they heard voices from out of the city, loud voices, saying, Say ye to the daughter of Zion, Behold, thy salvation cometh. Behold, his reward is with him. Here all the inhabitants of the country called them the holy people, and redeemed of the Lord, sought out, etc. Now as they walked in this land, they had more rejoicing than in parts more remote from the kingdom to which they were bound, and drawing near to the city, they had yet a more perfect view thereof. It was built of pearls and precious stones. Also the streets thereof were paved with gold, so that by reason of the natural glory of the city, and the reflection of the sunbeams upon it, Christian with desire fell sick. Hopeful also had a fit or two of the same disease. Wherefore here they lay by it a while, crying out because of their pangs.
If you see my beloved, tell him that I am sick of love.
But being a little strengthened, and better able to bear their sickness, they walked on their way, and came yet nearer and nearer, where were orchards, vineyards, and gardens, and their gates opened into the highway. Now as they came up to these places, behold, the gardener stood in the way, to whom the pilgrims said,
Whose goodly vineyards and gardens are these?
He answered,
They are the king's, and are planted here for his own delight, and also for the solace of pilgrims.
So the gardener had them into the vineyards, and bid them refresh themselves with the dainties. He also showed them there the king's walks, and the arbours where he delighted to be, and here they tarried and slept. Now I beheld in my dream that they talked more in their sleep at this time than ever they did in all their journey, and being in thought thereabout, the gardener said even to me,
Wherefore dost thou meditate the matter? It is the nature of the fruit of the grapes of these vineyards to go down so sweetly as to cause the lips of them that are asleep to speak.
So I saw, when they awoke, they undertook to go up to the city. But, as I said, the reflection of the sun upon the city, for the city was pure gold, was so extremely glorious that they could not as yet with open face behold it, but through a glass made for that purpose. So I saw that, as they went on, there met them 2 men in raiment that shone like gold, also their faces shone as the light. These men asked the pilgrims whence they came, and they told them. They also asked them where they had lodged, what difficulties and dangers, what comforts and pleasures they had met in the way, and they told them. Then said the men that met them,
"You have but 2 difficulties more to meet, and then you are in the city."
Christian then and his companion asked the man to go along with them, so they told them that they would.
"But,"
said they,
"you must obtain it by your own faith."
So I saw in my dream that they went on together, till they came in sight of the gate. Now I further saw that betwixt them and the gate was a river, but there was no bridge to go over, and the river was very deep. At the sight, therefore, of this river, the pilgrims were much stunned. But the men that went with them said,
"You must go through, or you cannot come at the gate."
The pilgrims then began to inquire if there was no other way to the gate, to which they answered,
"Yes, but there hath not any save 2, to wit, Enoch and Elijah, been permitted to tread that path since the foundation of the world, nor shall until the last trumpet shall sound."
The pilgrims then, especially Christian, began to be anxious in his mind, and looked this way and that, but no way could be found by them by which they might escape the river. Then they asked the men if the waters were of a depth. They said,
"No."
Yet they could not help them in that case.
"For,"
said they,
"you shall find it deeper or shallower as you believe in the king of the place."
They then addressed themselves to the water, and entering, Christian began to sink, and crying out to his good friend Hopeful, he said,
I sink in deep waters, the billows go over my head, all his waves go over me.
Then said the other,
Be of good cheer, my brother. I feel the bottom, and it is good.
Then said Christian,
Ah, my friend, the sorrows of death have compassed me about. I shall not see the land that flows with milk and honey.
And with that a great darkness and horror fell upon Christian, so that he could not see before him, nor orderly talk of any of those sweet refreshments that he had met with in the way of his pilgrimage. But all the words that he spake still tended to show that he had horror of mind, and heart fears that he should die in that river, and never obtain entrance in at the gate. Here also, as they that stood by perceived, he was much in the troublesome thoughts of the sins that he had committed, both since and before he began to be a pilgrim. It was also observed that he was troubled with the sight of demons and evil spirits, for ever and anon he would intimate so much by words. Hopeful, therefore, had had much ado to keep his brother's head above water. Yea, sometimes he would be quite gone down, and then, ere a while, he would rise up again, half dead. Hopeful would also endeavour to comfort him, saying,
Brother, I see the gate, and men standing by to receive us.
But Christian would answer,
It is you they wait for. You have been hopeful ever since I knew you.
And so have you,
said he to Christian.
Ah, brother,
said he,
surely if I were right, he would now arise to help me, but for my sins he hath brought me into this snare, and hath left me.
Then said Hopeful,
My brother, these troubles and distresses that you go through in these waters are no sign that God hath forsaken you, but are sent to try you, whether you will call to mind that which hitherto you have received of his goodness, and live upon him in your distresses.
Then I saw in my dream that Christian was in thought a while, to whom also Hopeful added these words,
Be of good cheer. Jesus Christ maketh thee whole.
And with that Christian brake out with a loud voice,
Oh, I see him again, and he tells me, When thou passest through the waters, I will be with thee, and through the rivers they shall not overflow thee.
Then they both took courage, and the enemy was after that as still as a stone, until they were gone over. Christian therefore presently found ground to stand upon, and so it followed that the rest of the river was but shallow. Thus they got over. Now upon the bank of the river on the other side they saw the two shining men again, who there waited for them. Wherefore, being come out of the river, they saluted them, saying,
We are heavenly spirits, sent forth to help those who shall be heirs of salvation.
Thus they went along towards the gate. Now you must note that the city stood upon a mighty hill, but the pilgrims went up that hill with ease, because they had these two men to lead them up by the arms. Also they had left their mortal garments behind them in the river, for though they went in with them, they came out without them. They therefore went up here with much activity and speed, though the foundation upon which the city was framed was higher than the clouds. They therefore went up through the regions of the air, sweetly talking as they went, being comforted because they had safely got over the river, and had such glorious companions to attend them. The talk they had with the Shining Ones was about the glory of the place, who told them that the beauty and glory of it were such as could not be put into words.
There,
said they,
is the Mount Zion, the heavenly Jerusalem, the innumerable company of angels, and the spirits of good men made perfect. You are going now,
said they,
to the paradise of God, wherein you shall see the tree of life, and eat of the never-fading fruit thereof. And when you come there, ye shall have white robes given you, and your walk and talk shall be every day with the King, even all the days of an eternal life. There ye shall not see again such things as you saw when you were in the lower region upon the earth, to wit, sorrow, sickness, affliction, and death, for the former things are passed away. You are going now to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, and to the prophets, men that God hath taken away from the evil to come, and that are now resting upon their beds, each one walking in his righteousness.
The men then asked,
What must we do in the holy place?
To whom it was answered,
You must there receive the comfort of all your toil, and have joy for all your sorrow. You must reap what you have sown, even the fruit of all your prayers and tears and sufferings for the King by the way. In that place you must wear crowns of gold, and enjoy the perpetual sight and visions of the Holy One, for there you shall see him as he is. There also you shall serve him continually with praise, with shouting and thanksgiving, whom you desired to serve in the world, though with much difficulty, because of the weakness of your bodies. There your eyes shall be delighted with seeing, and your ears with hearing the pleasant voice of the Mighty One. There you shall enjoy your friends again that are gone thither before you, and there you shall with joy receive even every one that follows into the holy place after you. There also you shall be clothed with glory and majesty, and put into a state fit to ride out with the King of glory. When he shall come with sound of trumpet in the clouds, as upon the wings of the wind, you shall come with him. And when he shall sit upon the throne of judgment, you shall sit by him. Yea, and when he shall pass sentence upon all the workers of evil, let them be angels or men, you also shall have a voice in that judgment, because they were his and your enemies. Also, when he shall again return to the city, you shall go too, with sound of trumpet, and be ever with him.
Now while they were thus drawing towards the gate, behold, a company of the heavenly host came out to meet them, to whom it was said by the other two Shining Ones,
These are the men that have loved our Lord when in the world, and that have left all for his holy name. And he hath sent us to fetch them, and we have brought them thus far on their desired journey, that they may go in and look their Redeemer in the face with joy.
Then the heavenly host gave a great shout, saying, Blessed are they which are called to the marriage supper of the Lamb. There came out also at this time to meet them several of the king's trumpeters, clothed in white and shining raiment, who, with melodious noises and loud, made even the heavens to echo with their sound. These trumpeters saluted Christian and his fellow with 10,000 welcomes from the world, and this they did with shouting and sound of trumpet. This done, they compassed them round on every side. Some went before, some behind, and some on the right hand, some on the left, as it were to guard them through the upper regions, continually sounding as they went with melodious noise in notes on high, so that the very sight was to them that could behold it as if heaven itself was come down to meet them. Thus, therefore, they walked on together, and as they walked, ever and anon these trumpeters, even with joyful sound, would, by mixing their music with looks and gestures, still signify to Christian and his brother how welcome they were into their company, and with what gladness they came to meet them. And now were these two men as it were in heaven before they came at it, being swallowed up with the sight of angels, and with hearing of their melodious notes. Here also they had the city itself in view, and thought they heard all the bells therein to ring, and welcomed them thereto. But above all, the warm and joyful thoughts that they had about their own dwelling there with such company, and that for ever and ever. Oh, by what tongue or pen can their glorious joy be expressed? And thus they came up to the gate. Now when they were come up to the gate, there was written over it in letters of gold, Blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life, and may enter in through the gates into the city. Then I saw in my dream that the shining men bid them call at the gate, the which, when they did, some from above looked over the gate, such as Enoch, Moses, and Elijah, and others, to whom it was said, These pilgrims are come from the city of destruction for the love that they bear to the king of this place. And then the pilgrims gave in unto them each man his certificate, which they had received in the beginning. Those therefore were carried into the king, who, when he had read them, said,
Where are the men?
To whom it was answered,
They are standing without the gate.
The king then commanded to open the gate.
That the righteous nation,
said he,
which keepeth the truth, may enter in.
Now I saw in my dream that these two men went in at the gate, and lo, as they entered, their looks were changed, so that their faces became bright, and they had garments put on that shone like gold. There were also that met them with harps and crowns, and gave them to them, the harps to praise withal, and the crowns in token of honour. Then I heard in my dream that all the bells in the city rang again for joy, and that it was said unto them,
Enter ye into the joy of the Lord.
I also heard the men themselves, that they sang with a loud voice, saying,
Blessing and honour and glory and power be unto him that sitteth upon the throne, and unto the Lamb, for ever and ever.
Now, just as the gates were opened to let in the men, I looked in after them, and behold, the city shone like the sun. The streets also were paved with gold, and in them walked many men with crowns on their heads, palms in their hands, and golden harps to sing praises withal. There were also of them that had wings, and they answered one another without ceasing, saying,
Holy, holy, holy is the Lord.
And after that they shut up the gates, which, when I had seen, I wished myself among them. Now, while I was gazing upon all these things, I turned my head to look back, and saw Ignorance come up to the river-side. But he soon got over, and that without half the difficulty which the other two men met with. For it happened that there was then in the place one Vain Hope, a ferryman, that with his boat helped him over. So he, as the others, I saw, did ascend the hill to come up to the gate. Only he came alone, neither did any man meet him with the least encouragement. when he was come up to the gate, he looked up to the writing that was above, and then began to knock, supposing that entrance should have been quickly given to him. But he was asked by the men that looked over the top of the gate,
Whence came you, and what would you have?
He answered,
I have eaten and drunk in the presence of the king, and he has taught in our streets.
Then they asked him for his certificate, that they might go in and show it to the king. So he fumbled in his bosom for one, and found none. Then said they,
Have you none?
But the man answered never a word. So they told the king. But he would not come down to see him, but he commanded the two shining ones that conducted Christian and Hopeful to the city to go out and take Ignorance and bind him hand and foot, and have him away. Then they took him up, and carried him through the air to the door that I saw in the side of the hill, and put him in there. Then I saw that there was a way to hell even from the gates of heaven, as well as from the city of destruction. So I awoke, and behold, it was a dream. End of Chapter 11. End of Part 1 of The Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. The Pilgrim's Progress, Part 2, Chapter 1. The Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan, Part 2, Chapter 1. Courteous Companions. Some time since, to tell you my dream that I had of Christian the Pilgrim and of his dangerous journey towards the celestial country, was pleasant to me and profitable to you. I told you then also what I saw concerning his wife and children, and how unwilling they were to go with him on pilgrimage, insomuch that he was forced to go on his progress without them, for he durst not run the danger of that destruction which he feared would come by staying with them in the city of destruction. Wherefore, as I then showed you, he left them and departed. Now it hath so happened, through the abundance of business, that I have been much hindered and kept back from my wonted travels into those parts whence he went, and so could not, till now, obtain an opportunity to make further inquiry after those whom he left behind, that I might give you an account of them. But having had some concerns that way of late, I went down again thitherward. Now, having taken up my lodgings in a wood about a mile off the place, as I slept, I dreamed again. And as I was in my dream, behold, an aged gentleman came by where I lay, and because he was to go some part of the way that I was travelling, methought I got up and went with him. So, as we walked, and as travellers usually do, I was as if we fell into discourse, and our talk happened to be about Christian and his travels, for thus I began with the old man. Sir, said I, what town is that there below, that lieth on the left hand of our way? Then said Mr. Sagacity, for that was his name,
It is the city of destruction, a populous place, but possessed with a very ill-conditioned and idle sort of people.
I thought that was the city, quoth I. I went once myself through that town, and therefore know that this report you give of it is true.
Too true. I wish I could speak truth in speaking better of them that dwell therein.
Well, sir, quoth I, then I perceive you to be a well-meaning man, and so one that takes pleasure to hear and tell of that which is good. Pray, did you never hear what happened to a man some time ago of this town, whose name was Christian, that went on pilgrimage up toward the higher regions?
Hear of him? Aye, and I also heard of the difficulties, troubles, wars, captivities, cries, groans, frights, and fears that he met with, and had in his journey. Besides, I must tell you all our country rings of him. But there are few houses that have heard of him and his doings, but have sought after and got the record of his pilgrimage. Yea, I think I may say that his hazardous journey has got many well-wishers to his ways, for though, when he was here, he was a fool in every man's mouth, yet now he is gone, he is highly commended of all. for 'tis said he lives bravely where he is. Yea, many of them that are resolved never to run his risks, yet have their mouths water at his gains.
They may, quoth I, well think, if they think anything that is true, that he liveth well where he is. For he now lives at and in the fountain of life, and has what he has without labour and sorrow, for there is no grief mixed therewith. But pray, what talk have the people about him?
Talk? The people talk strangely about him. Some say that he now walks in white, that he has a chain of gold about his neck, that he has a crown of gold beset with pearls upon his head. Others say that the shining ones, that sometimes showed themselves unto him in his journey, are become his companions, and that he is as familiar with them in the place where he is, as here one neighbour is with another. Besides, it is confidently spoken concerning him, that the king of the place where he is has bestowed upon him already a very rich and pleasant dwelling at court, and that he every day eateth and drinketh and walketh with him, and receiveth of the smiles and favours of him that is judge of all there. Moreover, it is expected of some, that his prince, the lord of that country, will shortly come into these parts, and will know the reason, if they can give any, why his neighbours set so little by him, and had him so much in derision, when they perceived that he would be a pilgrim. For they say, now he is so in the affections of his prince, and that his sovereign is so much concerned with the wrongs that were cast upon Christian when he became a pilgrim, that he will look upon all as if done unto himself. And no marvel, for it was the love that he had to his prince, that he ventured as he did.
I dare say, quoth I am glad on't. I am glad for the poor man's sake, for that he now has rest from his labour, and for that he reapeth the benefit of his tears with joy, and for that he has got beyond gunshot of his enemies, and is out of reach of them that hate him. I also am glad for that a rumour of these things is noised abroad in this country. Who can tell but that it may work some good benefit on some that are left behind? But pray, sir, while it is fresh in my mind, do you hear anything of his wife and children? Poor hearts! I wonder in my mind what they do.
Who? Christiana and her sons. They are like to do as well as did Christian himself. For though when they all played the fool at first, and would by no means be persuaded by either the tears or entreaties of Christian, yet second thoughts wrought wonderfully with them, so they have packed up, and are also gone after him.
Better and better, quoth I. But what, wife and children and all?
It is true. I can give you an account of the matter, for I was upon the spot at the instant, and was thoroughly acquainted with the whole affair.
Then, said I, a man, it seems, may report it for a truth.
You need not fear to declare it. I mean that they are all gone on pilgrimage, both the good woman and her 4 boys, and, since we are, as I perceive, going some considerable way together, I will give you an account of the whole matter. This Christiana, for that was her name from the day that she, with her children, betook themselves to a pilgrim's life, after her husband had gone over the river, and she could hear of him no more, her thoughts began to work in her mind, first, for that she had lost her husband, and of that the loving bond of that relation was utterly broken betwixt them. For you know, said he to me, it is only natural that the living should have many sad thoughts in the remembrance of the loss of loving relations. This, therefore, of her husband did cost her many a tear. But this was not all, for Christiana did also begin to consider with herself whether unbecoming behaviour towards her husband was not one cause that she saw him no more, and that in such sort he was taken away from her. And upon this came into her mind by swarms all her unkind, unnatural, and ungodly treatment of her dear friend, which also troubled her conscience, and did load her with guilt. She was, moreover, much broken with recalling to remembrance the restless groans, brinish tears, and self-bemoanings of her husband, and how she did harden her heart against all his entreaties and loving persuasions of her and her sons to go with him. Yea, there was not anything that Christian either said to her or did before her all the while that his burden did hang on his back, but it returned upon her like a flash of lightning, and rent her heart in sunder. Specially that bitter outcry of his,
"What shall I do to be saved?"
did ring in her ears most dolefully. Then she said to her children,
"Sons, we are all undone. I have sinned away your father, and he is gone. He would have had us with him, but I would not go myself. I also have hindered you of life."
With that the boys fell all into tears, and cried out to go after their father.
"Oh,"
said Christiana,
"that it had been but our lot to go with him! Then had it fared well with us, beyond what it is like to do now. For though I formerly foolishly imagined, concerning the troubles of your father, that they came from a foolish fancy that he had, or for that he was overrun with melancholy humours, yet now it will not out of my mind, but that they sprang from another cause, and it was this, that the light of life was given him, by the help of which, as I perceive, he has escaped the snares of death."
Then they all wept again, and cried out,
"Oh, woe worth the day!"
The next night Christiana had a dream, and behold, she saw as if a bright parchment were opened before her, in which were recorded the sum of her ways, and the times, as she thought, looked very black upon her. Then she cried out aloud in her sleep,
"Lord, have mercy upon me, a sinner!"
and the little children heard her. After this she thought she saw two very ill-favoured ones standing by her bedside, and saying,
"What shall we do with this woman? For she cries out for mercy, waking and sleeping. If she be suffered to go on as she begins, we shall lose her as we have lost her husband. Wherefore we must, by one way or other, seek to take her off from the thoughts of what shall be hereafter. Else, the world cannot help, but she will become a pilgrim."
Now she awoke in a great sweat. Also a trembling was upon her, but after a while she fell to sleeping again. And then she thought she saw Christian, her husband, in a place of bliss, among many immortals, with a harp in his hand, standing and playing upon it before one that sat upon a throne, with a rainbow about his head. She saw also, as if he bowed his head with his face to the paved work that was under the prince's feet, saying,
"I heartily thank my lord and king for bringing of me into this place."
Then shouted a company of them that stood round about, and harped with their harps, but no man living could tell what they said, but Christian and his companions. Next morning, when she was up and had prayed to God and talked with her children a while, one knocked hard at the door, to whom she spake out, saying,
"If thou comest in God's name, come in."
So he said,
"Amen,"
and opened the door, and saluted her with,
"Peace be to this house."
The which, when he had done, he said,
"Christiana, knowest thou wherefore I come?"
Then she blushed and trembled. Also her heart began to wax warm with desires to know from whence he came, and what was his errand to her. So he said unto her,
"My name is Secret. I dwell with those that are on high. It is talked of where I dwell as if thou hadst a desire to go thither. Also there is a report that thou art aware of the evil thou hast formerly done to thy husband, in hardening thy heart against his way, and in keeping of these thy babes in their ignorance. Christiana, the merciful one, has sent me to tell thee that he is a God ready to forgive, that he taketh delight to pardon offences. He also will have thee know that he invited thee to come into his presence, to his table, and that he will feed thee with the fat of his house, and with the heritage of Jacob thy father. There is Christian thy husband, that was, with legions more, his companions. Ever behold that face that doth minister life to beholders, and they will be glad when they shall hear the sound of thy feet step over thy father's threshold.
Christiana, at this, was greatly abashed in herself, and bowed her head to the ground. This visitor proceeded and said,
Christiana, here is also a letter for thee, which I have brought from thy husband's king.
So she took it and opened it, but it smelt after the manner of the best perfume. Also it was written in letters of gold. The contents of the letter were these, that the king would have her do as Christian her husband, for that was the way to come to his city, and to dwell in his presence with joy forever. At this the good woman was quite overcome, so she cried out to her visitor,
Sir, will you carry me and my children with you, that we also may worship this king?
Then said the visitor,
Christiana, the bitter is before the sweet. Thou must through troubles, as did he that went before thee, enter the celestial city. Wherefore I advise thee to do as did Christian thy husband. Go to the wicket gate yonder over the plain, for that stands in the head of the way up which you must go, and I will wish thee all good speed. Also I advise that you put this letter in thy bosom, that thou read therein to thyself and to thy children, until you have got it by rote of heart. For it is one of the songs that thou must sing while thou art in this house of thy pilgrimage. Also this thou must deliver in at the farther gate.
Now I saw in my dream that this old gentleman, as he told me the story, did himself seem to be greatly affected therewith. He moreover went on, and said,
So Christiana called her sons together, and began thus to address herself unto them.
My sons, I have, as you may perceive, been of late under much trouble in my soul about the death of your father. Not for that I doubt at all of his happiness, for I am satisfied now that he is well. I have also been much affected with the thoughts of mine own state, and yours, which I verily believe is by nature miserable. My treatment also of your father in his distress is a great load to my conscience, for I hardened both mine own heart and yours against him, and refused to go with him on pilgrimage. The thoughts of these things would now kill me outright, but for a dream which I had last night, and but for the encouragement that this stranger has given me this morning. Come, my children, let us pack up, and be gone to the gate that leads to the celestial country, that we may see your father, and be with him and his companions in peace, according to the laws of that land.
Then did her children burst out into tears, for joy that the heart of their mother was so inclined. So their visitor bade them farewell, and they began to prepare to set out for their journey. But while they were thus about to be gone, 2 of the women that were Christiana's neighbours came up to the house and knocked at the door. To whom she said as before,
If you come in God's name, come in.
At this the women were stunned, for this kind of language they used not to hear, or to perceive to drop from the lips of Christiana. Yet they came in, but behold, they found the good woman preparing to be gone from her house. So they began and said,
Neighbour, pray what is your meaning by this?
Christiana answered and said to the eldest of them, whose name was Mrs. Timorous,
I am preparing for a journey.
This Timorous was daughter to him that met Christian upon the hill Difficulty, and would have had him go back for fear of the lions.
For what journey, I pray you?
Even to go after my good husband.
And with that she fell a-weeping.
I hope not so, good neighbour. Pray, for your poor children's sake, do not so unwomanly cast away yourself.
Nay, my children shall go with me. Not one of them is willing to stay behind.
I wonder in my very heart what or who has brought you into this mind.
O neighbour, knew you but as much as I do, I doubt not but that you would go with me.
Prithee, what new knowledge hast thou got, that so worketh off thy mind from thy friends, and that tempteth thee to go nobody knows where.
Then Christiana replied,
I have been sorely afflicted since my husband's departure from me, but especially since he went over the river. But that which troubleth me most is my unkind treatment of him when he was under his distress. Besides, I am now as he was then. Nothing will serve me but going on pilgrimage. I was a-dreaming last night that I saw him. Oh, that my soul was with him! He dwelleth in the presence of the king of the country. He sits and eats with him at his table. He has become a companion of immortals, and has a house now given him to dwell in, to which the best palaces on earth, if compared, seem to me but as a dunghill. The prince of the place has also sent for me, with promises of entertainment if I shall come to him. His messenger was here even now, and has brought me a letter which invites me to come.
and with that she plucked out the letter and read it, and said to them,
What now will you say to this?
Oh, the madness that hath possessed thee and thy husband, to run yourselves upon such difficulties! You have heard, I am sure, what your husband did meet with, even a manner at the first step that he took on his way, as our neighbour Obstinate can yet testify, for he went along with them, yea, and Pliable too, until they, like wise men, were afraid to go on any farther. We also heard over and above how he met with the lions, Apollyon, the shadow of death, and many other things. Nor is the danger he met with at Vanity Fair to be forgotten by thee. For if he, though a man, was so hard put to it, what canst thou, being but a poor woman, do? Consider also that these 4 sweet babes are thy children, thy flesh and thy bones. Wherefore, though thou shouldest be so rash as to cast away thyself, yet for the sake of thy children keep thou at home.
But Christiana said unto her,
Tempt me not, my neighbour. I have now a price put into my hands to get gain, and I should be a fool of the greatest size if I should have no heart to strike in with the opportunity. And for that you tell me of all these troubles which I am like to meet with in the way. They are so far off from being to me a discouragement, that they show I am in the right. The bitter must come before the sweet, and that also will make the sweet the sweeter. Wherefore, since you came not to my house, in God's name, as I said, I pray you to be gone, and not to disquiet me further.
Then Timorous reviled her, and said to her fellow,
Come, neighbour Mercy, let us leave her in her own hands, since she scorns our counsel and company.
But Mercy was at a stand, and could not so readily comply with her neighbour, and that for a twofold reason. One, her heart yearned over Christiana, so she said within herself,
If my neighbour will needs be gone, I will go a little way with her, and help her.
2, her heart yearned over her own soul, for what Christiana had said had taken hold upon her mind. Wherefore she said within herself again,
I will yet have more talk with this Christiana, and if I find truth and life in what she shall say, myself with my heart shall also go with her.
Wherefore Mercy began thus to reply to her neighbour Timorous.
Neighbour, I did indeed come with you to see Christiana this morning, and since she is, as you see, taking her last farewell of her country, I think to walk this sunshiny morning a little with her, to help her on her way.
But she told her not of the second reason, but kept that to herself.
Well, I see you have a mind to go a-fooling too, but take heed in time and be wise. While we are out of danger, we are out, but when we are in, we are in.
So Mrs. Timorous returned to her house, and Christiana betook herself to her journey. But when Timorous was got home to her house, she sends for some of her neighbours, to wit, Mrs. Bat-eyes, Mrs. Inconsiderate, Mrs. Light-mind, and Mrs. Know-nothing. So when they were come to her house, she falls to telling of the story of Christiana, and of her intended journey. And thus she began her tale.
Neighbours, having had little to do this morning, I went to give Christiana a visit, and when I came at the door I knocked, as you know it is our custom, and she answered, If you come in God's name, come in. So in I went, thinking all was well. But when I came in, I found her preparing herself to depart the town, she and also her children. So I asked her what was her meaning by that, and she told me in short that she was now of a mind to go on a pilgrimage, as did her husband. She told me also a dream that she had had, and how the king of the country where her husband was had sent her an inviting letter to come thither.
Then said Mrs. Know-Nothing,
And what? Do you think she will go?
Ay, go she will, whatever comes on it, and methinks I know it by this, for that which was my great reason persuading her to stay at home, that is, the trouble she was like to meet with in the way, is one great reason with her to put her forward on her journey, for she told me in so many words, the bitter goes before the sweet, yea, and forasmuch as it so doth, it makes the sweet the sweeter.
Mrs. Bat-Eyes,
Oh, this blind and foolish woman!
said she,
Will she not take warning by his husband's trials? For my part, I see if he were here again, he would rest him content in a whole skin, and never run so many dangers for nothing.
Mrs. Inconsiderate also replied, saying,
Away with such fantastical fools from the town. A good riddance, for my part, I say of her. Should she stay where she dwells, and retain this her mind, who could live quietly by her? For she will either be dumpish, or unneighbourly, or talk of such matters as no wise body can abide. Wherefore, for my part, I shall never be sorry for her departure. Let her go, and let better come in her room. It was never a good world since these whimsical fools dwelt in it.
Then Mrs. Lightmind added, as followeth,
Come, put this kind of talk away. I was yesterday at Madame Wanton's, where we were as merry as the maids. For who do you think should be there, but I and Mrs. Love-the-Flesh, and 3 or 4 more, with Mr. Lettry, Mrs. Filth, and some others. So there we had music and dancing, and what else was meet to fill up the pleasure? And, I dare say, my lady herself is an admirable well-bred gentlewoman, and Mr. Lettry is as pretty a fellow.
End of Part 2, Chapter 1. The Pilgrim's Progress, Part 2, Chapter 2. The Pilgrim's Progress, by John Bunyan, Part 2, Chapter 2. The Wicket Gate.
By this time Christiana was got on her way, and Mercy went along with her. So as they went, her children being there also, Christiana began to discourse.
And Mercy,
said Christiana,
I take this as an unexpected favour, that thou shouldst set forth out of doors with me, to accompany me a little in my way.
Then said young Mercy, for she was but young,
If I thought it would be a good purpose to go with you, I would never go near the town any more.
Well, Mercy,
said Christiana,
cast in thy lot with me. I well know it will be the end of our pilgrimage. My husband is where he would not be but for all the gold in the Spanish mines, nor shalt thou be turned away, though thou goest but upon my invitation. The king who hath sent for me and my children is one that delighteth in mercy. Besides, if thou wilt, I will hire thee, and thou shalt go along with me as my servant. Yet we will have all things in common betwixt thee and me, only go along with me.
But how shall I be sure that I also shall be welcomed? Had I this hope but from one that can tell, I would have no hesitation at all, but would go, being helped by him that can help, though the way be never so tedious.
Well, loving Mercy, I will tell thee what thou shalt do. Go with me to the wicket gate, and there I will further enquire for thee. And if there thou dost not meet with encouragement, I will be content that thou shalt return to thy place. I also will pay thee for thy kindness, which thou showest to me and my children, in the accompanying of us in our way as thou dost.
Then I will go thither, and will take what shall follow, and the Lord grant that my lot may there fall, even as the King of Heaven shall have his heart upon me.
Christiana was then glad at her heart, not only that she had a companion, but also for that she had prevailed with this poor maid to fall in love with her own salvation. So they went on together, and Mercy began to weep. Then said Christiana,
Wherefore weepeth my sister so?
Alas,
said she,
who can but lament, that shall but rightly consider what estate and condition my poor relations are in, that yet remain in our sinful town? And that which makes my grief the more heavy is, because they have no one to teach them, nor to tell them what is to come.
Tenderness becometh pilgrims, and thou dost for thy friends as my good Christian did for me when he left me. He mourned for that I would not heed nor regard him, but his Lord and ours did gather up his tears, and put them into his bottle. And now both I and thou, and these my sweet babes, are reaping the fruit and benefit of them. I hope, Mercy, that these tears of thine will not be lost, For the truth hath said that they that sow in tears shall reap in joy, in singing, and he that goeth forth and weepeth, bearing precious seed, shall doubtless come again with rejoicing, bringing his sheaves with him.
Then said Mercy,
Let the most blessed be my guide, if it be his blessed will, unto his gate, into his fold, up to his holy hill. And never let him suffer me to swerve or turn aside from his free grace and holy ways, whate'er shall me betide. And let him gather them of mine that I have left behind. Lord, make them pray that they may be thine, with all their heart and mind.
Now my old friend proceeded, and said,
But when Christiana came to the Slough of Despond, she began to be at a stand.
For,
said she,
this is the place in which my dear husband had like to have been smothered with mud.
She perceived also that, notwithstanding the command of the king to make this place for pilgrims good, yet it was rather worse than formerly.
So I asked if that was true.
Yes,
said the old gentleman.
Too true. For many there be that pretend to be the king's labourers, and say they are for mending the king's highway, that bring dirt and dung instead of stones, and so mar instead of mending. Here Christiana, therefore, with her boys, did make a stand. But said Mercy,
Come, let us venture, only let us be wary.
Then they looked well to their steps, and made shift to get staggeringly over. Yet Christiana had to have been in, and that not once nor twice. Now they had no sooner got over, but they thought they heard words that said unto them, Blessed is she that believeth, for there shall be a performance of those things which were told her from the Lord. Then they went on again, and said Mercy to Christiana,
Had I as good ground to hope for a loving reception at the wicket gate as you, I think no Slough of Despond would discourage me.
Well,
said the other,
you know your trouble, and I know mine. And, good friend, we shall have enough evil before we come at our journey's end. For can it be imagined that the people that design to attain such excellent glories as we do, and that are so envied that happiness as we are, but that we shall meet with what fears, with what troubles and afflictions they can possibly assault us with, that hate us?
And now Mr. Sagacity left me to dream out my dream by myself. Wherefore, methought I saw Christiana and Mercy and the boys go all of them up to the gate, to which when they were come, they betook themselves to a short debate about how they must manage their calling at the gate, and what should be said unto him that did open unto them. So it was concluded, since Christiana was the eldest, that she should knock for entrance, and that she should speak to him that did open for the rest. So Christiana began to knock, and, as her poor husband did, she knocked and knocked again. But instead of any that answered, they all thought that they heard as if a dog came barking upon them, a dog, and a great one too, and this made the women and the children afraid. Nor durst they for a while to knock any more, for fear the mastiff should fly upon them. Now, therefore, they were greatly tumbled up and down in their minds, and knew not what to do. Knock they durst not, for fear of the dog. Go back they durst not, for fear the keeper of the gate should espy them as they so went, and should be offended with them. At last they thought of knocking again, and knocked more loudly than they did at first. Then said the keeper of the gate,
Who is there?
So the dog left off to bark, and he opened unto them. Then Christiana made low obeisance, and said,
Let not our lord be offended with his handmaidens, for that we have knocked at his princely gate.
Then said the keeper,
Whence come ye, and what is it that you would have?
Christiana answered,
We are come from whence Christian did come, and upon the same errand as he, to wit, to be, if it shall please you, graciously admitted by this gate into the way that leads to the celestial city. And I answer, my lord, in the next place, that I am Christiana, once the wife of Christian, that now is gotten above.
With that the keeper of the gate did marvel, saying,
What? Is she now become a pilgrim, that but a while ago hated that life?
Then she bowed her head, and said,
Yes, and so are these my sweet babes also.
Then he took her by the hand, and led her in, and said also,
Suffer the little children to come unto me.
And with that he shut up the gate. This done, he called to a trumpeter that was above, over the gate, to entertain Christiana with shouting and the sound of trumpet for joy. So he obeyed and sounded, and filled the air with his melodious notes. Now all this while poor Mercy did stand without trembling and crying, for fear that she was rejected. But when Christiana had got admittance for herself and her boys, then she began to make intercession for Mercy.
My lord, I have a companion of mine that stands yet without, that is come hither upon the same account as myself, one that is much troubled in her mind, for that she comes, as she thinks, without sending for, whereas I was sent to by my husband's king to come.
Now Mercy began to be very impatient, for each minute was as long to her as an hour. Wherefore she prevented Christiana from asking for her more fully by knocking at the gate herself. And she knocked then so loud that she made Christiana to start. Then said the keeper of the gate,
Who is there?
And said Christiana,
It is my friend.
So he opened the gate and looked out. But Mercy was fallen down without in a swoon, for she fainted, and was afraid that no gate would be opened to her. Then he took her by the hand, and said,
Maiden, I bid thee arise.
"Oh, sir,"
said she,
"I am faint. There is scarce life left in me."
But he answered that,
One once said, When my soul fainted within me, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came in unto thee, into thy holy temple. Fear not, but stand upon thy feet, and tell me wherefore thou art come.
"I am come for that unto which I was never invited, as my friend Christiana was. Hers was from the king, and mine was but from her. Wherefore I fear, I presume."
Did she desire thee to come with her to this place?
"Yes, and as my lord sees, I am come, and if there is any grace and forgiveness of sins to spare, I beseech that I, thy poor handmaiden, may be partaker thereof."
Then he took her again by the hand, and led her gently in, and said,
I pray for all them that believe on me, by what means soever they come unto me.
Then said he to those that stood by,
Fetch something, and give it to Mercy to smell on, thereby to stay her fainting.
So they fetched her a bundle of myrrh, and a while after she was revived. And now was Christiana and her boys and Mercy received of the Lord at the head of the way, and spoke kindly unto by him. Then said they yet further unto him,
We are sorry for our sins, and beg of our Lord his pardon, and further information what we must do.
I grant pardon,
said he,
by word and deed, by word in the promise of forgiveness, by deed in the way I obtained it. Take the first from my lips with a kiss, and the other as it shall be revealed.
Now I saw in my dream that he spake many good words unto them, whereby they were greatly gladded. He also had them up to the top of the gate, and showed them by what deed they were saved, and told them withal that that sight they would have again as they went along the way, to their comfort. So he left them a while in the summer parlour below, where they entered into a talk by themselves, and thus Christiana began.
O Lord, how glad am I that we are gotten hither!
"So you well may, but I of all have cause to leap for joy."
I thought one time as I stood at the gate, because I knocked, and none did answer, that all our labour had been lost, especially when that ugly cur made such a heavy barking against us.
But my worst fear was after I saw that you were taken into his favour, and that all was left behind. Now I thought, it is fulfilled which is written, 2 women shall be grinding in the mill, the one shall be taken, and the other left. I had much ado to forbear crying out, Undone, undone! And afraid I was to knock any more. But when I looked up to see what was written over the gate, I took courage. I also thought that I must either knock again or die, so I knocked, but I cannot tell how, for my spirit now struggled betwixt life and death.
Can you not tell how you knocked? I am sure your knocks were so earnest that the very sound of them made me start. I thought I never heard such knocking in all my life. I thought you would come in by violent hands, or take the kingdom by storm.
Alas, to be in my case, who that so was could but have done so? You saw that the door was shut upon me, and that there was a most cruel dog thereabout. Who, I say, that was so faint-hearted as I, would not have knocked with all their might? But pray, what said my lord to my rudeness? Was he not angry with me?
When he heard your lumbering noise, he gave a wonderful innocent smile. I believe what you did pleased him well enough, for he showed no sign to the contrary. But I marvel in my heart why he keeps such a dog. Had I known that afore, I should not have had heart enough to have ventured myself in this manner. But now we are in, and I am glad with all my heart.
I will ask, if you please, next time he comes down, why he keeps such a filthy cur in his yard. I hope he will not take it amiss.
I do,
said the children.
and persuade him to hang him, for we are afraid he will bite us when we go hence.
So at last he came down to them again, and Mercy fell to the ground on her face before him, and worshipped, and said,
Let my lord accept the offering of praise which I now offer unto him with my lips.
So he said unto her,
Peace be to thee. Stand up.
But she continued upon her face, and said,
Righteous art thou, O Lord, when I plead with thee. Yet let me talk with thee of thy judgments. Wherefore dost thou keep so cruel a dog in thy yard, at the sight of which such women and children as we are ready to fly from the gate with fear?
He answered and said,
That dog has another owner. He also is kept close in another man's ground. Only my pilgrims hear his barking. He belongs to the castle which you can see there at the distance, but can come up to the walls of this place. He has frightened many an honest pilgrim from worse to better, by the great voice of his roaring. Indeed, he that owneth him doth not keep in out of any good will, to me or mine, but with intent to keep the pilgrims from coming to me, and that they may be afraid to come and knock at this gate for entrance. Sometimes also he is broken out, and has worried some that I love. But I take all at present patiently. I also give my pilgrims timely help, so that they are not delivered up to his power to do with them what his doggish nature would prompt him to. But what, my beloved one, I should suppose, hadst thou known even so much beforehand, thou wouldst not have been afraid of a dog. The beggars that go from door to door will, rather than lose the supposed alms, run the danger of the bawling, barking, and biting too of a dog. And shall a dog in another man's yard, a dog whose barking I turn to the profit of pilgrims, keep any one from coming to me? I deliver them from the lions, their darling, from the power of the dog.
Then said Mercy,
I confess my ignorance. I spake what I understood not. I acknowledge that thou doest all things well.
Then Christiana began to talk of their journey, and to inquire after the way. So he fed them, and washed their feet, and set them in the way of his steps, according as he had dealt with her husband before. So I saw in my dream that they walked on in their way, and had the weather very comfortable to them. Then Christiana began to sing,
Blessed be the day that I began a pilgrim for to be, and blessed also be the man that there to moved me. 'Tis true 'twas long ere I began to seek to live for ever, but now I run fast as I can. 'Tis better late than never. Our tears to joy, our fears to faith are turned as we see. Thus our beginning, as one saith, shows what our end will be.
Now there was on the other side of the wall that fenced in the way up which Christiana and her companions were to go, a garden, and that garden belonged to him whose was that barking dog of whom mention was made before. And some of the fruit trees that grew in the garden shot their branches over the wall, and being mellow, they that found them did gather them up, and oft eat of them, to their hurt. So Christiana's boys, as boys are apt to do, being pleased with the trees, and the fruit that did hang thereon, did bend the branches down, and pluck the fruit, and begin to eat. Their mother did also chide them for so doing, but still the boys went on.
Well,
said she,
my sons, you do wrong, for that fruit is none of ours.
but she did not know that it did belong to the enemy. I'll warrant you, if she had, she would have been ready to die for fear. But that passed, and they went on their way. Now, by that they were gone about 2 bowshots from the place that led them unto the way, they espied 2 very ill-favoured ones coming down apace to meet them. With that, Christiana and Mercy, her friend, covered themselves with their veils, and so kept on their journey. The children also went on before, so that at last they met together. Then they that came down to meet them came just up to the women, as if they would embrace them. But Christiana said,
Stand back, or go peaceably by, as you should.
Yet these 2, as men that are deaf, regarded not Christiana's words, but began to lay hands upon them. At that Christiana, waxing very wroth, spurned at them with her feet. Mercy also, as well as she could, did what she could to shift them. Christiana again said to them,
Stand back and be gone, for we have no money to lose, being pilgrims, as you see, and such too as live upon the charity of our friends.
Then said one of the 2 men,
We make no assault upon you for money, but I come out to tell you that, if you will grant one small request, which we shall ask, we will make women of you for ever.
Now Christiana, imagining what they should mean, made answer again.
We will neither hear, nor regard, nor yield to what you shall ask. We are in haste, and cannot stay. Our business is a business of life or death.
So again she and her companions made a fresh attempt to go past them, and they letted them in their way, and they said,
We intend no hurt to your lives. It is another thing we would have.
Ay,
quoth Christiana,
you would have us body and soul, for I know it is for that you are come, but we will die rather upon the spot than to suffer ourselves to be brought into such snares as shall risk the loss of our well-being hereafter.
And with that they both shrieked out, and cried,
Murder! Murder!
And so put themselves under those laws that are provided for the protection of women. But the men still made their approach upon them, with design to prevail against them. They therefore cried out again. Now they being, as I said, far from the gate in at which they came, their voices were heard from where they were thither. Wherefore some of the house came out, and knowing it was Christiana's tongue, they made haste to her relief. But by the time they were got within sight of them, the women were in a very great terror. The children also stood crying by. Then did he that came in for their relief call out to the ruffians, saying,
What is that thing you do? Would you make my lord's people to do wrong?
He also attempted to take them, but they did make their escape over the wall into the garden of the man to whom the great dog belonged. So the dog became their protector. This reliever then came up to the women and asked them how they did. So they answered,
We thank thy prince pretty well, only we have been somewhat affrighted.
We thank thee also for that thou camest in to our help, otherwise we had been overcome.
So after a few more words, this reliever said as followeth,
I marvelled much when you were entertained at the gate above, being ye knew that ye were but weak women, that you asked not the Lord for a conductor. Then might you have avoided these troubles and dangers, for he would have granted you one.
Alas,
said Christiana,
we were taken so with our present blessing, that dangers to come were forgotten by us. Besides, who could have thought that so near the king's palace there could have lurked such naughty ones? Indeed, it had been well for us had we asked our lord for one, but since our lord knew it would be for our profit, I wonder he sent not one along with us.
It is not always necessary to grant things not asked for, lest, by doing so, they become of little value. But when the want of a thing is felt, that he who needs it feels its preciousness, and so when it is given it will be used. Had my lord granted you a conductor, you would not either have so bewailed that oversight of yours, in not asking for one, as now you have occasion to do. So all things work for good, and tend to make you more wary.
Shall we go back again to my lord, and confess our folly, and ask for one?
Your confession of your folly I will present him with. To go back again you need not, for in all places where you shall come, you will find no want at all. For in every one of my lord's lodgings, which he has prepared for the care of his pilgrims, there is sufficient to furnish them against all attempts whatsoever. But, as I said, he will be asked of by them to do it for them. And 'tis a poor thing that is not worth asking for.
When he had thus said, he went back to his place, and the pilgrims went on their way. Then said Mercy,
"What a sudden blank is here! I made account we had been past all danger, and that we should never see sorrow more."
"Thy innocence, my sister,"
said Christiana to Mercy,
"may excuse thee much, but as for me, fault is so much the greater, for that I saw the danger before I came out of the doors, and yet did not provide for it when provision might have been had. I am therefore much to be blamed."
Then said Mercy,
"How knew you this before you came from home? Pray open to me this riddle."
"Why, I will tell you. Before I set foot out of doors one night, as I lay in my bed, I had a dream about this, for methought I saw two men, as like these as ever any in the world could look, stand at my bed's feet, plotting how they might prevent my salvation. I will tell you their very words. They said, it was when I was in my troubles,
"What shall we do with this woman? For she cries out, waking and sleeping, for forgiveness. If she be suffered to go on as she begins, we shall lose her as we have lost her husband."
This, you know, might have made me take heed, and have provided when provision might have been had.
"Well,"
said Mercy,
"as by this neglect we have been made to behold our own imperfections, so our Lord has taken occasion thereby to make manifest the riches of his grace. For he, as we see, has followed us with unasked kindness, and has delivered us from their hands that were stronger than we, of his mere good pleasure."
End of Part 2, Chapter 2. The Pilgrim's Progress, Part 2, Chapter 3. The Pilgrim's Progress, by John Bunyan, Part 2, Chapter 3. The Interpreter's House. Thus now, when they had talked away a little more time, they drew near to a house which stood in the way, which house was built for the relief of pilgrims, as you will find more fully related in the first part of these records of the Pilgrim's Progress. So they drew on towards the house of the interpreter, and when they came to the door they heard a great talk in the house. Then they gave ear, and heard, as they thought, Christiana mentioned by name. For you must know that there went along, even before her, a talk of her and her children's going on pilgrimage. And this was the more pleasing to them, because they had heard she was Christian's wife, that woman who was some time ago so unwilling to hear of going on pilgrimage. Thus, therefore, they stood still, and heard the good people within commending her, who, they little thought, stood at the door. At last Christiana knocked, as she had done at the gate before. Now when she had knocked, there came to the door a young maiden, and opened the door, and looked. And behold, two women were there. Then said the maid to them,
"With whom would you speak in this place?"
Christiana answered,
"We understand that this is a place prepared for those that are become pilgrims, and we now at this door are such, wherefore we pray that we may be partakers of that for which we at this time are come. For the day, as thou seest, is very far spent, and we are loth to-night to go any farther."
"Pray, what may I call your name, that I may tell it to my lord within?"
"My name is Christiana. I was the wife of that pilgrim that some years ago did travel this way, and these be his 4 children. This young woman is my companion, and is going on pilgrimage too."
Then Innocent ran in, for that was her name, and said to those within,
"Can you think who is at the door? There are Christiana and her children, and her companion, all waiting for entertainment here."
Then they leaped for joy, and went and told their master. So he came to the door, and looking upon her, he said,
"Art thou that Christiana, whom Christian the good man left behind, when he betook himself to a pilgrim's life?"
"I am that woman that was so hard-hearted as to slight my husband's troubles, and then left him to go on his journey alone, and these are his 4 children. But now also I am come, for I am convinced that no way is right but this."
Then is fulfilled that which is written of the man that said to his son, "Go, work today in my vineyard." And he said to his father, "I will not." But afterwards he repented and went.
Then said Christiana,
So be it. Amen. God made it a true saying upon me, and grant that I may be found at the last of him in peace, without spot and blameless.
But why standest thou thus at the door? Come in, thou blessed one. We were talking of thee but now, for tidings have come to us before how thou art become a pilgrim. Come, children, come in. Come, maiden, come in.
So he had them all into the house. So when they were within, they were bidden to sit down and rest them. The which, when they had done, those that attended upon the pilgrims in the house came into the room to see them. And one smiled, and another smiled, and they all smiled for joy that Christiana was become a pilgrim. They also looked upon the boys. They stroked them over the faces with the hand, in token of their kind reception of them. They also carried it lovingly to Mercy, and bid them all welcome into their master's house. After a while, because supper was not ready, the interpreter took them into his significant rooms, and showed them what Christiana's husband, had seen some time before. Here, therefore, they saw the man in the cage, the man and his dream, the man that cut his way through his enemies, and the picture of the biggest of them all, together with the rest of those things that were then so profitable to Christian. This done, and after those things had been seen and thought of by Christiana and her company, the interpreter takes them apart again, and has them first into a room where was a man that could look no way but downwards, with a muck-rake in his hand. There stood also one over his head, with a celestial crown in his hand, and proffered to give him that crown for his muck-rake. But the man did neither look up nor regard, but raked to himself the straws, the small sticks, and the dust of the floor. Then said Christiana,
I persuade myself that I know somewhat the meaning of this, for this is a figure of a man of this world. Is it not, good sir?
Thou hast said the right,
said he.
And his muck-rake doth show his worldly mind. And whereas thou seest him rather give heed to rake up straws and sticks, and the dust off the floor, than to do what he says that calls to him from above with the celestial crown in his hand, it is to show that heaven is but a fable to some, and that things here are counted the only things substantial. Now, whereas it was also showed thee that the man could look no way but downwards, it is to let thee know that earthly things, when they are with power upon men's minds, quite carry their hearts away from God.
Then said Christiana,
Oh, deliver me from this muck-rake.
That prayer,
said the interpreter,
has lain by till it is almost rusty. Give me not riches, is scarce the prayer of one of 10,000. Straws and sticks and dust, with most, are the great things now looked after.
With that, Mercy and Christiana wept, and said,
It is, alas, too true.
When the interpreter had showed them this, he had them into the very best room in the house, a very brave room it was. So he bid them look round about, and see if they could find anything there. Then they looked round and round, for there was nothing to be seen but a very great spider on the wall, and that they overlooked. Then said Mercy,
Sir, I see nothing.
But Christiana held her peace.
But,
said the interpreter,
look again.
She therefore looked again, and said,
Here is not anything but an ugly spider, who hangs by her hands upon the wall.
Then said he,
Is there but one spider in all this spacious room?
Then the water stood in Christiana's eyes, for she was a woman quick of mind, and she said,
Yes, my lord, there is here more than one, yea, and spiders whose venom is far more destructive than that which is in her.
The interpreter then looked pleasantly upon her, and said,
Thou hast said the truth.
This made Mercy blush, and the boys to cover their faces, for they all began now to understand the riddle. Then said the interpreter again,
The spider taketh hold with her hands, as you see, and is in kings' palaces. And wherefore is this recorded, but to show you that, how full of venom of sin soever you be, yet you may, by the hand of faith, lay hold of and dwell in the best room that belongs to the king's house above.
I thought,
said Christiana,
of something of this, but I could not imagine it all. I thought that we were like spiders, and that we looked like ugly creatures, in what fine rooms soever we were, but that by this spider, this venomous and ill-favoured creature, we were to learn how to act faith, that came not into my mind, and yet she has taken hold with her hands, and, as I see, dwelleth in the best room in the house. God has made nothing in vain.
Then they seemed all to be glad, but the wonder stood in their eyes. Yet they looked one upon the other, and also bowed before the interpreter. He had them then into another room, where were a hen and chickens, and bid them observe a while. So one of the chickens went to the trough to drink, and every time she drank, she lifted up her head and her eyes toward heaven.
See,
said he,
what this little chick doth, and learn of her to acknowledge whence your mercies come, by receiving them with looking up. Yet again,
said he,
observe and look.
So they gave heed, and perceived that the hen did walk in a fourfold method towards her chickens. First, she had a common call, and that she hath all day long. Secondly, she had a special call, and that she had but sometimes. Thirdly, she had a brooding note, and fourthly, she had an outcry.
Now,
said he,
compare this hen to your king, and these chickens to his obedient ones. For, answerable to her, he himself hath his methods which he walketh in towards his people. By his common call he gives nothing. By his special call he always has something to give. He also has a brooding voice for them that are under his wing, and he hath an outcry to give the alarm when he seeth the enemy come. I chose, my darlings, to lead you into the room where such things are, because you are women, and they are easy for you.
And, sir,
said Christiana,
pray let us see some more.
So he had them into the slaughter-house, where the butcher was killing a sheep, and behold, the sheep was quiet, and took her death patiently. Then said the interpreter,
You must learn of this sheep to suffer, and to put up with wrongs without murmurings and complaints. Behold how quietly she takes her death, and, without objecting, she suffereth her skin to be pulled over her ears. Your king doth call you his sheep.
After this he led them into his garden, where was great variety of flowers, and he said,
Do you see all these?
So Christiana said,
Yes.
Then said he again,
Behold, the flowers are diverse in stature, in quality, in colour, and smell, and virtue, and some are better than others. Also, where the gardener has set them, there they stand, and quarrel not with one another.
Again he held them into his field, which he had sowed with wheat and corn. But when they beheld, the tops of all were cut off, and only the straw remained. He said again,
This ground was made rich, and was ploughed and sowed, but what shall we do with the crop?
Then said Christiana,
Burn some, and make muck of the rest.
Then said the interpreter again,
Fruit, you see, is that thing you look for, and for want of that you send it to the fire, and to be trodden under foot of men. Beware that in this you condemn not yourselves.
Then, as they were coming in from abroad, they espied a little robin with a great spider in his mouth. So the interpreter said,
Look here.
So they looked, and Mercy wondered. But Christiana said,
What a disparagement is it to such a pretty little bird as the robin redbreast is, he being also a bird above many, that loveth to maintain a kind of sociableness with man. I had thought they had lived upon crumbs of bread, or upon other such harmless matter. I like him worse than I did.
The interpreter then replied,
This robin is an emblem very apt to set forth some people by. For to sight they are as this robin, pretty of note, colour, and conduct. They seem also to have a very great love for those that are sincere followers of Christ, and above all other to desire to associate with them, and to be in their company, as if they could live upon the good man's crumbs. They pretend also that therefore it is that they frequent the house of the godly and the appointments of the Lord. But when they are by themselves, as the robin, they can catch and gobble up spiders, they can change their diet, drink wickedness, and swallow down sin like water.
So when they were come again into the house, because supper as yet was not ready, Christiana again desired that the interpreter would either show or tell of some other things that were profitable. Then the interpreter began, and said,
The fatter the sow is, the more she desires the mire. The fatter the ox is, the more thoughtlessly he goes to the slaughter. And the more healthy the lusty man is, the more prone he is unto evil. There is a desire in women to go neat and fine, and it is a comely thing to be adorned with that which in God's sight is of great price. 'Tis easier watching a night or two than to sit up a whole year together. So 'tis easier for one to begin to profess well than to hold out as he should to the end. Every shipmaster, when in a storm, will willingly cast that overboard which is of the smallest value in the vessel. But who will throw the best out first? None but he that feareth not God. One leak will sink a ship, and one sin will destroy a sinner. He that forgets his friend is ungrateful unto him, but he that forgets his Saviour is unmerciful to himself. He that lives in sin and looks for happiness hereafter is like him that soweth weeds, and thinks to fill his barn with wheat and barley. If a man would live well, let him bring before him his last day, and make it always his company-keeper. Whispering and change of thoughts prove that sin is in the world. If the world, which God sets light by, is counted a thing of that worth with men, what is heaven that God commendeth? If the life that is attended with so many troubles is so loath to be let go by us, what is the life above? Everybody will cry up the goodness of men, but who is there that is, as he should be, affected with the goodness of God?
When the interpreter had done, he takes them out into the garden again, and had them to a tree, whose inside was all rotten and gone, and yet it grew and had leaves. Then said Mercy,
What means this?
This tree,
said he,
whose outside is fair, and whose inside is rotten, is that to which many may be compared that are in the garden of God, who with their mouths speak high in behalf of God, but indeed will do nothing for him, whose leaves are fair, but their heart good for nothing but to be tinder for the devil's tinderbox.
Now supper was ready, the table spread, and all things set on the board. So they sat down and did eat when one had given thanks. And the interpreter did usually entertain those that lodged with him with music at meals. So the minstrels played. There was also one that did sing, and a very fine voice he had. His song was this: The Lord is only my support, and he that doth me feed. How can I then want anything whereof I stand in need? When the song and music were ended, the interpreter asked Christian what it was that first did move her to betake herself to a pilgrim's life. Christiana answered,
First, the loss of my husband came into my mind, at which I was heartily grieved, but all that was but natural affection. Then after that came the troubles and pilgrimages of my husband into my mind, and also how unkindly I had behaved to him as to that. So guilt took hold of my mind, and would have drawn me into the pond, to drown myself, but that, just at the right time, I had a dream of the well-being of my husband, and a letter sent by the king of that country, where my husband dwells, to come to him. The dream and the letter together so wrought upon my mind, that they forced me to this way.
But met you with no opposition afore you set out of doors?
Yes, a neighbour of mine, one Mrs. Timorous. She was akin to him that would have persuaded my husband to go back for fear of the lions. She all to befooled me, for as she called it, my intended desperate adventure, she also urged what she could to dishearten me from it, the hardship and troubles that my husband met with in the way. But all this I got over pretty well. But a dream that I had of two ill-looked ones, that I thought did plot how to make me fail in my journey, that hath troubled me much, yea, it still runs in my mind, and makes me afraid of every one that I meet, lest they should meet me to do me a mischief, and to turn me out of my way. Yea, I may tell my lord, though I would not have everybody know it, that between this and the gate by which we got into the way, we were both so sorely attacked that we were made to cry out murder, and the two that made this attack upon us were like the two that I saw in my dream.
Then said the interpreter,
Thy beginning is good, thy latter end shall greatly increase.
So he addressed himself to Mercy, and said unto her,
And what moved thee to come hither, sweetheart?
Then Mercy blushed and trembled, and for a while continued silent. Then said he,
Be not afraid, only believe, and speak thy mind.
So she began, and said,
Truly, sir, my lack of knowledge is that which makes me wish to be in silence, and that also fills me with fears of coming short at last. I cannot tell of visions and dreams, as my friend Christiana can, nor know I what it is to mourn for my refusing the advice of those that were good relations.
What was it then, dear heart, that hath prevailed thee to do as thou hast done?
Why, when our friend here was packing up to be gone from our town, I and another went accidentally to see her. So we knocked at the door, and we went in. When we were within, and seeing what she was doing, we asked her what was her meaning. She said she was sent for to go with her husband, and then she up and told us how she had seen him in a dream, dwelling in a wonderful place among immortals, wearing a crown, playing upon a harp, eating and drinking at his prince's table, and singing praises to him for bringing him thither, and so on. Now methought while she was telling these things unto us, my heart burned within me. And I said in my heart, If this be true, I will leave my father and my mother and the land of my birth, and will, if I may, go along with Christiana. So I asked her further of the truth of these things, and if she would let me go with her, for I saw now that there was no dwelling, but with the danger of ruin any longer in our town. But yet I came away with a heavy heart, not for that I was unwilling to come away, but for that so many of my relations were left behind. And I am come with the desire of my heart, and will go, if I may, with Christiana, unto her husband and his king.
Thy setting out is good, for thou hast given credit to the truth. Thou art a Ruth, who did, for the love she bare to Naomi and to the Lord her God, leave father and mother and the land of her birth, to come out and go with a people that she knew not heretofore. The Lord bless thy work, and a full reward be given thee of the Lord of Israel, under whose wings thou art come to trust.
Now supper was ended, and preparation was made for bed. The women were laid singly alone, and the boys by themselves. Now when Mercy was in bed, she could not sleep for joy, for that now her doubts of missing at last were removed farther from her than ever they were before. So she lay blessing and praising God, who had such favour for her. In the morning they arose with the sun, and prepared themselves for their departure, but the interpreter would have them tarry a while.
For,
said he,
you must orderly go from hence.
Then said he to the maid that first opened to them,
Take them, and have them into the garden, to the bath, and there wash them, and make them clean from the soil which they have gathered by travelling.
Then Innocent the maid took them, and had them into the garden, and brought them to the bath. So she told them they must wash and be clean, for so her master would have the women to do that called at his house, as they were going on pilgrimage. Then they went in and washed, yea, they and the boys and all, and they came out of the bath, not only sweet and clean, but also much enlivened and strengthened in their joints. So when they came in, they looked fairer a deal than when they went out to the washing. When they were returned out of the garden from the bath, the interpreter took them, and looked upon them, and said unto them,
Fair as the moon.
Then he called for a seal, wherewith they used to be sealed that were washed in this bath. So the seal was brought, and he set his mark upon them, that they might be known in the places whither they were yet to go, and the mark was set between their eyes. This seal added greatly to their beauty, for it was an ornament to their faces. It also added to their glory, and made their countenances more like those of angels. Then said the interpreter again to the maid that waited upon these women,
Go into the vestry, and fetch out garments for these people.
So she went and fetched out white raiment, and laid it down before him. So he commanded them to put it on. It was fine linen, white and clean. When the women were thus adorned, they seemed to be afraid one of the other, for that they could not see that glory each one had in herself, which they could see in each other. Now, therefore, they began to esteem each other better than themselves, for
"You are fairer than I am,"
said one, and
"You are more beautiful than I am,"
said another. The children also stood amazed to see into what fashion they were brought. The interpreter then called for a manservant of his, one Greatheart, and bid him take sword and helmet and shield, and
"Take these, my daughters,"
said he,
"and conduct them to the house called Beautiful, at which place they will rest next."
So he took his weapons and went before them, and the interpreter said,
"Godspeed."
Those also that belonged to the family sent them away with many a good wish. So they went on their way and sang.
This place hath been our second stage. Here we have heard and seen those good things that from age to others hid have been. The dunghill raker, spider, hen, the chicken too, to me, have taught a lesson. Let me then conformed to it be.
The butcher garden and the field, the robin and his bait, also the rotten tree, doth yield me argument of weight, to move me for to watch and pray, to strive to be sincere, to take my cross up day by day, and serve the Lord with fear.
End of Part 2, Chapter 3. The Pilgrim's Progress, Part 2, Chapter 4. The Pilgrim's Progress, by John Bunyan, Part 2, Chapter 4. The Cross and the Consequences. Now I saw in my dream that they went on, and Greatheart before them. So they went, and came to a place where Christian's burden fell off his back, and tumbled into a sepulchre. Here, then, they made a pause, and here also they blessed God.
Now,
said Christiana,
comes to my mind what was said to us at the gate, to wit, that we should have pardon by word and deed, by word, that is, by the promise, by deed, that is, in the way it was obtained. What the promise is, of that I know something. But what it is to have pardon by deed, or in the way that it was obtained, Mr. Greatheart, I suppose you know. Wherefore, if you please, let us hear you speak thereof.
Pardon by the deed done is pardon obtained by some one for another that hath need thereof, not by the person pardoned, but in the way, saith another, in which I have obtained it. So then, to speak to the question at large, the pardon that you, and Mercy, and these boys have obtained, was obtained by another, to wit, by him that let you in at the gate. And he hath obtained it in this double way. He has shown righteousness to cover you, and spilt his blood to wash you in.
This is brave. Now I see that there was something to be learnt by our being pardoned by word and deed. Good Mercy, let us labour to keep this in mind. And my children, do you remember it also. But, sir, was not this it that made my good Christian's burdens fall from off his shoulders, and that made him give 3 leaps for joy?
Yes, it was the belief of this that cut off those strings that could not be cut by other means, and it was to give him proof of the virtue of this, that he was suffered to carry his burden to the cross.
I thought so, for though my heart was lightsome and joyous before, yet it is 10 times more lightsome and joyous now, and I am persuaded by what I have felt, though I have felt but little as yet, that if the most burdened man in the world was here, and did see and believe as I now do, it would make his heart merry and blithe.
There is not only comfort and the ease of a burden brought to us by the sight and consideration of these, but an endeared love born in us by it. For who can, if he doth but once think that pardon comes, not only by promise, but thus, but be affected with the way and means of his redemption, and so love the man that hath wrought it for him?
True. Methinks it makes my heart bleed, to think that he should bleed for me. O thou loving one! O thou blessed one! Thou deservest to have me. Thou hast bought me. Thou deservest to have me all. Thou hast paid for me 10,000 times more than I am worth. No marvel that this made the water stand in my husband's eyes, and that it made him trudge so nimbly on. I am persuaded he wished me with him, but vile wretch that I was, I let him come all alone. O Mercy, that thy father and mother were here, yea, and Mrs. Timorous also. Nay, I wish now with all my heart that here was Madam Wanton too. Surely, surely their hearts would be affected, nor could the fear of the one, nor the powerful passions of the other, prevail with them to go home again, and refuse to become good pilgrims.
You speak now in the warmth of your affections. Will it, think you, be always thus with you? Besides, this is not given to every one, nor to every one that did see your Jesus bleed. There were that stood by, and that saw the blood run from his heart to the ground, and yet were so far off this, that instead of lamenting, they laughed at him, and instead of becoming his disciples, did harden their hearts against him. So that all that you have, my daughters, you have by a peculiar feeling, made by a thinking upon what I have spoken to you. This you have, therefore, by a special grace.
Now I saw still in my dream that they went on till they were come to a place that simple and sloth and presumption lay and slept in, when Christian went by on pilgrimage. And behold, they were hanged up in irons a little way off on the other side. Then said Mercy to him that was their guide and conductor,
What are those 3 men? And for what are they hanged there?
These 3 men were men of very bad qualities. They had no mind to be pilgrims themselves, and whomsoever they could they hindered. They were for sloth and folly themselves, and whomsoever they could persuade with, they made so too, and withal taught them to presume that they should do well at last. They were asleep when Christian went by, and now you go by, they are hanged.
But could they persuade any to be of their opinion?
Yes, they turned several out of the way. There was slow pace that they persuaded to do as they. They also pervaded with one short wind, with one no heart, with one linger after lust, and with one sleepy head, and with a young woman, her name was Dull, to turn out of the way and become as they. Besides, they brought up an ill report of your Lord, persuading others that he was a hard taskmaster. They also brought up an evil report of the good land, saying it was not half so good as some pretended it was. They also began to speak falsely about his servants, and to count the very best of them meddlesome, troublesome busybodies. Further, they would call the bread of God husks, the comforts of his children fancies, the travel labour of pilgrims things to no purpose.
Nay,
said Christiana,
if they were such, they never shall be bewailed by me. They have but what they deserve, and I think it is well that they hang so near the highway, that others may see and take warning. But had it not been well if their crimes had been engraven on some plate of iron or brass, and left here where they did their mischiefs, for a caution to other bad men?
So it is, as you well may perceive, if you will go a little to the wall.
No, no, let them hang, and their names rot, and their crimes live for ever against them. I think it a high favour that they were hanged afore we came hither, who knows? Else, what they might have done to such poor women as we are.
Then she turned it into a song, saying,
Now then, you 3 hang there, and be a sign to all that shall against the truth combine. And let him that comes after fear this end, if unto pilgrims he is not a friend. And thou, my soul, of all such men beware, that unto holiness opposers are.
Thus they went on till they came at the foot of the hill Difficulty, where again their good friend Mr. Greatheart took an occasion to tell them of what happened there when Christian himself went by. So he had them first to the spring.
Lo,
saith he,
this is the spring that Christian drank of before he went up this hill, and then it was clear and good. But now it is dirty with the feet of some that are not desirous that pilgrims here should quench their thirst.
Thereat Mercy said,
And why are they so envious, I wonder?
But said their guide,
It will do if taken up and put into a vessel that is sweet and good, for then the dirt will sink to the bottom, and the water come out by itself more clear.
Thus, therefore, Christiana and her companions were compelled to do. They took it up, and put it into an earthen pot, and so let it stand till the dirt was gone to the bottom, and then they drank thereof. Next he showed them the 2 byways that were at the foot of the hill, where formality and hypocrisy lost themselves, And said he,
These are dangerous paths. 2 were here cast away when Christian came by, and although, as you see, these ways are since stopped up with chains, posts, and a ditch, yet there are that will choose to adventure here, rather than take the pains to go up this hill.
The way of transgressors is hard. It is a wonder that they can get into those ways without danger of breaking their necks.
They will venture, yea, if at any time any of the king's servants doth happen to see them, and doth call unto them, and tell them that they are in the wrong ways, and do bid them beware the danger, then they will railingly return them answer, and say, As for the word that thou hast spoken unto us in the name of the king, we will not hearken unto thee, but we will certainly do whatsoever thing goeth forth out of our own mouth. Nay, if you look a little farther, you shall see that these ways are warned against enough, not only by these posts, and ditch, and chain, but also by being hedged up, yet they will choose to go there.
They are idle. They love not to take pains. Uphill way is unpleasant to them. So it is fulfilled unto them, as it is written, The way of the slothful man is a hedge of thorns. Yea, they will rather choose to walk upon a snare than go up this hill, and the rest of this way to the city.
Then they set forward, and began to go up the hill, and up the hill they went. But before they got to the top, Christiana began to pant, and said,
I dare say this is a breathing hill. No marvel if they that love their ease more than their souls choose to themselves a smoother way.
Then said Mercy,
I must sit down.
Also the least of the children began to cry.
Come, come,
said Greatheart.
Sit not down here, for a little above is the prince's arbour.
Then took he the little boy by the hand, and led him up thereto. When they were come to the arbour, they were very willing to sit down, for they were all in a pelting heat. Then said Mercy,
How sweet is rest to them that labour, and how good is the Prince of Pilgrims to provide such resting places for them. Of this arbour I have heard much, but I never saw it before. But here let us beware of sleeping, for, as I have heard, for that cost poor Christian dear.
Then said Greatheart to the little ones,
Come, my pretty boys, how do you do? What think you now of going on pilgrimage?
Sir,
said the least,
I was almost beat out of heart, but I thank you for lending me a hand at my need. And I remember now what my mother has told me, namely, that the way to heaven is as up a ladder, and the way to hell is as down a hill. But I rather go up a ladder to life than the hill to death.
Then said Mercy,
But the proverb is, to go down the hill is easy.
But James said, for that was his name,
The day is coming when, in my opinion, going downhill will be the hardest of all.
That's a good boy,
said his master.
Thou hast given her a right answer.
Then Mercy smiled, but the little boy did blush.
Come,
said Christiana.
Will you eat a bit, a little to sweeten your mouths, while you sit here to rest your legs? For I have here a piece of pomegranate, which Mr. Interpreter put in my hand, just when I came out of his doors. He gave me also a piece of a honeycomb, and a little bottle of spirits.
I thought he gave you something,
said Mercy.
Because he called you aside.
Yes, so he did,
said the other.
But Mercy, it shall still be as I said it should, when at first we came from home. Thou shalt be a sharer in all the good that I have, because thou so willingly didst become my companion.
Then she gave to them, and they did eat, both Mercy and the boys. And said Christiana to Mr. Greatheart,
Sir, will you do as we, and take some refreshment?
But he answered,
You are going on pilgrimage, and presently I shall return. Much good may have do to you. At home I eat the same every day.
Now, when they had eaten and drunk, and had chatted a little longer, their guide said to them,
The day wears away. If you think good, let us prepare to be going.
So they got up to go, and the little boys went before. But Christiana forgot to take her bottle of spirits with her, so she sent her little boy back to fetch it. Then said Mercy,
I think this is a losing place. Here Christian lost his roll, and here Christiana left her bottle behind her. Sir, what is the cause of this?"
So their guide made answer and said,
"The cause is sleep or forgetfulness. Some sleep when they should keep awake, and some forget when they should remember. And this is the very cause why often at the resting places some pilgrims in some things come off losers. Pilgrims should watch, and remember what they have already received under their greatest enjoyments. But for want of doing so, oft-times their rejoicing ends in tears, and their sunshine in a cloud. Witness the story of Christian at this place."
When they were come to the place where Mistrust and Timorous met Christian, to persuade him to go back for fear of the lions, they perceived as it were a stage, and before it, towards the road, a broad plate, with a copy of verses written thereon, and underneath the reason of the raising up of that stage in that place rendered. The verses were these: "Let him that sees this stage take heed unto his heart and tongue, lest, if he do not, here he speed as some have long agone." This stage was built to punish such upon who, through timorousness or mistrust, shall be afraid to go farther on pilgrimage. Also on this stage both Mistrust and Timorous were burned through the tongue with a hot iron, for endeavouring to hinder Christian in his journey. Then said Mercy,
"This is much like the saying of the Beloved, 'What shall be given unto thee, or what shall be done unto thee, thou false tongue? Sharp arrows of the mighty with coals of juniper.'"
So they went on, till they came within sight of the lions. Now Mr. Greatheart was a strong man, so he was not afraid of a lion. But yet, when they were come up to the place where the lions were, the boys that went before were glad to cringe behind, for they were afraid of the lions, so they stepped back and went behind. At this their guide smiled, and said,
"How now, my boys? Do you love to go before when no danger doth approach, and love to come behind so soon as the lions appear?"
Now, as they went up, Mr. Greatheart drew his sword, with intent to make a way for the pilgrims in spite of the lions. Then there appeared one that, it seems, had taken upon him to back the lions, and he said to the pilgrim's guide,
"What is the cause of you coming hither?"
Now the name of that man was Grim, or Bloody Man, because of his slaying of pilgrims, and he was of the race of the giants. Then said the pilgrim's guide,
"These women and children are going on pilgrimage, and this is the way they must go, and go it they shall, in spite of thee and the lions."
"This is not thy way, neither shall they go therein. I am come forth to withstand them, and to that end will back the lions."
Now, to say truth, by reason of the fierceness of the lions, and of the grim carriage of him that did back them, this way had of late lain much unoccupied, and was almost all grown over with grass. Then said Christiana,
"Though the highways have been unoccupied heretofore, and though the travellers have been made in times past to walk through by-paths, it must not be so now I am risen. Now I am risen a mother in Israel."
Then he swore by the lions,
"But it should,"
and therefore bid them turn aside, for they should not passage there. But Greatheart their guide made first his approach unto Grim, and laid so heavily at him with his sword, that he forced him to a retreat. Then said he that attempted to back the lions,
"Will you slay me upon mine own ground?"
"It is the king's highway that we are in, and in his way it is that thou hast placed thy lions. But these women and these children, though weak, shall hold on their way in spite of thy lions."
And with that he gave him again a downright blow, and brought him upon his knees. With this blow he also broke his helmet, and with the next he cut off an arm. Then did the giant roar so hideously that his voice frighted the women, and yet they were glad to see him lie sprawling upon the ground. Now the lions were chained, and so of themselves could do nothing. Wherefore, when old Grim, that intended to back them, was dead, Mr. Greatheart said to the pilgrims,
"Come now, and follow me, and no hurt shall happen to you from the lions."
They therefore went on, but the women trembled as they passed by them. The boys also looked as if they would die, but they all got by without further hurt. End of Part 2, Chapter 4.